Well, I'm just going to welcome everybody for joining us. Thanks for listening in. Welcome to another edition of our Fireside Chat, sponsored by Ways That Love Your Money. I'm Katie Steck. I'm here with Elisabeth Dawson and Joe Strazzeri. Elisabeth and I are from Copia Wealth Management and Insurance Services and Copia Wealth Management Insurance Advisors, Inc. And we've got Joe with us to talk about some estate planning things. We're going to talk about just a lot of different topics when it comes to estate planning. What is a living trust? What's the difference between revocable and irrevocable? What is a special needs trust? Why is maybe a will not enough for you? What does a financial power of attorney do? And what to think about when talking about trustees for your trust as well. So without further ado, I'm going to let Joe introduce himself and what his little background.
Hi, I'm Joe Strazzeri. Let's see, a little background. I'm a good Sicilian son, married to a good Italian lady with two beautiful children, 19 and 14. My son goes to Gonzaga and is now home because of COVID, learning. My daughter's 15 and home part of the time because she goes to OLP here in San Diego. I'm a general contractor by trade. I hammered nails through law school in my latter 20s, became an attorney in my 30s. Now I'm often tagged with the tagline of being a practicing tax attorney, business attorney, family counselor, and estate planner.
And I'm Elisabeth Dawson, and for those of you that don't know who I am the financial advisor here for Copia Wealth Management and Insurance Services and Copia Wealth Management Advisors. And Katie's our case manager and also our junior advisor that is with me each and every day of the week, except Saturday and Sunday, unless I beg her. And she's been a great host for these fireside chats. But it's a true honor to be here with these great, incredible minds because I can't do it alone, and I need a village and a team to be able to help each and every one of our clients, as well as people that we're just newly meeting. So we're really honored to have Joe here today. He's an incredibly humble man when it comes to the work that he does and everything else that he is creative and coming up with wonderful strategies to make basically your life much easier, but also take some of the complicated threads of what we're dealing with today in tax law changes, which I think is going to be a big part of our conversation today, as well as, how do we navigate through some of these pieces when it comes to, are we thinking about charitable giving, maybe just even setting up our own estate plan in the initial, but what do we do from the strategy of passing down the legacy to the next generation? Most people think that they want to pass down that generation through their IRA. Well, there's something that changed in the tax law, and I can't wait to talk to Joe about it, and it's called the Secure Act. And we kind of got in the nitty gritty of it the other day. We've been trying to help strategies with clients of ours, and I think that Joe has some really simple solutions for complicated platforms. So again, thank you so much, Joe, for being here. It's a pleasure to have you. And I think, Katie, you wanted to kind of start out with a question.
Well, before I let you all take it away, I just wanted to remind our attendees, if you have any questions along the way, stick them in the chat. I will make sure that they get answered tonight. And maybe if we just want to start out with some basics, what does a trust do that just a simple will does not?
Sure. Elisabeth, are you going to answer that one?
Oh, well, I'm not the attorney, so I'm going to put that.
But Elisabeth, you're one of those financial advisors that read through more trust than most attorneys do with you and your team. But in essence, trust. Picture yourself, if you were to think like an entity. Most people know what a corporation is, or an LLC is, et cetera, another entity. Revocable trusts are a way for you to hold title to things that are in your name and your own tax ID number, not another entity. Irrevocable trusts or non-changeable trusts are when you get a tax ID number where it's a different entity. So we'll talk about revocable trusts first. Revocable trusts, most of you may know them as loving trust, living trust, revocable trust, ABC trust, or AB trust. When you're alive and well, carry your tax ID number or your Social Security number. I'm married to Annie, so our joint revocable living trust carries both of our Social Security numbers. We can own our assets in it. It does not asset protect any of our assets, but it's a contract. It's a contract between us as trustees and us as beneficiaries currently, my children as future beneficiaries, that allows things to be titled in that. My home is titled in our trust. My bank account, My car is in my trust name. My, my investment account is in my trust name. So that way, it's a contract that says, if Joe or Joe and Annie are disabled, here's who's in charge. So while we're alive and well, we're in charge. If we somehow are not competent mentally or out of capacity, then we've said who we want to be in charge. And we've got a bunch of rules in it, like a contract would, that says what to do with it during our disability. When one of us dies, let's say me first, because I'm older than my wife and I'm a boy, and she's much healthier. And this morning I had a beautifully large breakfast and she hiked Torrey Pines Hill.
Wow.
So she's more than likely going to outlive me. That all being said, if I'm disabled, she's then the sole trustees and she's in charge. And if I was to pass away one day, then she would be the surviving spouse, she'd be in charge. It'd bust up into a little sub-trust that said, here was Joe's half and here was hers. She's in charge of the whole thing. Take care of her first. Oh, by the way, she can take care of the kids with whatever she wants, but not required to. And if she hasn't changed it by the time she dies, the kids will get it. I can give her the power of the pen as to her half or the whole thing to rearrange and send it to other places. Or I can say, hey, honey, my half that you can use, once you die, goes to these people and the other can go to whoever you want. Probably not what I would do because I'm a jealous Italian type. But we'd also make sure that, but in second marriages, it's often really powerful to say, my children from my first marriage would get my stuff.
Mhm.
That part in my half would be my half of the community plus any separate I had that I had before I got married, or if I inherited it, or if I had some sort of prenup. So revocable trust takes care of you while you're alive and well, when one or both are disabled, and then after you pass away, kind of the rules. So it's rule set for taking care of those. And as long as it's not against the law or it is against public policy, we can do it. So against the law or against public policy. Against the law is obvious. Public policy, my favorite story is 15 years ago, they changed the rules. I could have written in my trust years ago in California that when I die, my part, all my separate plus that of the community went in this B or B and C bucket, and Annie got her A bucket. She could do whatever she wants out of that. This, she got income or use or during her life balance to the kids. In the old days, I could say, if she ever cohabitated, got married, turn off her water. And there was a court case that said, don't do that. You can't because you're alienating her ability to remarry. So we changed our public policy to say any rules that said turn off Annie's water if she remarries isn't valid. So that's a good example of what was valid and then got changed. The other buckets are irrevocable, which I'll talk about later. Yes.
No, I want to just ask you because I think this is the big part of the conversation when I'm talking with a client for the first time and they haven't done any kind of, living trust estate plan. They think that, oh gosh, when I die, it'll just go to, whoever, and I don't really care. Well, let's talk about the ugly side of that, especially in California. If you don't have a plan, what happens if you have, even $1 million estate, a $2 million estate, 5, 10, 15? What happens if you don't have even a will completed?
Sure. Well, the nice thing is you live in California, so the government of the state of California has a plan for you.
Don't they?
Yes, they have a plan for you. So don't worry about it. They got a plan for you.
But it's probably the plan you want.
Well, probably not. In California, our community property, if I didn't have a trust or a will, our community property would go to Annie. But my separate property would be divided amongst her and my kids. And that might be messy. And if my child is 19 and 15, those two children, the 19-year-old would get it in cash. And the 15-year-old would get it held by the court until they were 18. On their 18th birthday, woohoo, off they go. Brand new Corvette, and here we go.
And I went to school with a few people like that when they turned 18, oh my gosh, they had brand new beautiful cars, stereos, went, lavishly spent money, and mom or dad's legacy was gone.
Now, and yes, and even more important than legacy gone, we train somebody to burn through money and they have an extravagant lifestyle, they don't, and it lowers their self-esteem, it creates friends that are not true, it destroys friendships, and it can destroy lives. So there's such a thing, do I put guardrails around it? Do I train my kids ahead of time? When do they get it, when do they not? I think that's very personal to each family, and it's even more personal to, did you bring your children along the financial track? Did you let them know when the family had to tighten its belt? Did they know how to do that?
Right.
Did you ever cancel a vacation because of a work need or because of a cost or because of a change in financial circumstances? Whether it was false or not, just to show them there are differences. Did you ever take them to the bank or bring them to your financial advisor? I love it when families come to me and I say, you know what, let's take part of the kids' eventual money and can we put it in a little bucket? And they have to go to the financial advisor and manage it, and they have to report to you once a quarter what they did to it. I'll never forget this one young lady came into my office. She was 20 years old. And she said, Joe, I made $16,000.
Wow.
Hon, how'd you do that? She said, I went to my financial advisor, and in the last quarter, I made $16,000. That's more money than I saved at my job.
Oh,
And I said, well, why was that? She said, well, I'm starting to realize money can make money.
money can make money.
And I said, that's true. Let me tell you the opposite. You know the car you bought? Had you waited and saved up for it, you could have bought two.
Yeah.
Because how the magic of compounding interest that your financial advisor can talk to you about, money can make money, but payments on things let you have half of what you could have had.
Mhm.
And she looked at me, she said, that's not true. I talked to somebody, they say it's better to lease than it is to buy. I said, it might be better to lease than buy on credit, but nothing's better than buying cash on the barrel. So
Right.
it's an interesting thing you're talking about, helping children along rather than handing them a bucket one day, helping them learn how to manage money.
Well, and sometimes we even have clients that don't have children, but they might have a niece or a nephew or even a charitable entity that they want to pass money down to. And it's really just doing it. I mean, a living trust is so different than just a will. A will kind of dictates, but in the state of California, if you have a sizable enough estate, you're going to go through something called probate. And probate is kind of a really bad four-letter word, but it's longer than that. So how do we avoid those things to make sure that the planning process, whether it's going to children or a spouse or a friend, a business partner, nieces and nephews, or to a charity, it's control, right, Joe? It's really control that you can actually figure
Sure.
out want to occur.
You know, in the olden days, 20 plus years ago, if I can call that the olden days, attorneys would sell their practices. And in there, it would say how many filing cabinets or filing drawers they had of wills.
Mm.
Because with a will, that family would come back and they go into probate. And the
Mm.
attorney's fees and the executor fees would be high enough that that made a practice worth hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars, because all those drawers would eventually come to them one at a time and there'd be probate fees.
Wow, they're
Trusts,
their business in that.
sure, trusts avoid that probate fee. And it
Mhm.
also keeps my family's situation private, so we don't have to publicize what we have. The world doesn't know what my wife has afterwards, and my kids do. Within a
Mhm.
trust, it's private, a probate is public. So you get to avoid the delay, the cost, and publication.
Mhm.
And that's one of the reasons a trust is kind of, a revocable living trust is kind of nice to have.
I think maybe we can kind of parlay into the Secure Act, the tax law change that just happened a couple years ago, because I don't think everyone realizes what the biggest part of their legacy that they have or their estate might be next to their home might be a big retirement account. It's a 401k that turned into an IRA and now it's huge, but they're thinking that, their wife can continue or their spouse can continue to take payments, but what about their children and how does that work? Because this wonderful thing that we used to have called the stretch IRA no longer is relative. It's no longer available to our surviving generation. So I know you and I talked about this. Katie was on the call with us as well, and we were kind of chatting about how do we strategically make this make more sense, and we came up with a couple different strategies.
Sure. So, like Katie and I were talking about, one of the first things that happened right before the Secure Act by a few years was that inherited IRAs are no longer asset protected. So the rollover, if I die, it rolls to my wife. If I made it that way, if I made her my beneficiary, she could roll it into hers and take it as she would. She's younger than me, so she'd probably elect that. Elizabeth would tell her to do that. But for my children, if I made them the beneficiary of my retirement account, they used to be asset protected. Now they're not. So I might want to direct it to an irrevocable trust, a non-changeable trust that passed it through to them to where it was asset protected in case anybody sued them. So that was number one. Back in those days, it was a conduit or not. Are all the payments just make it through there and out to them, or does it accumulate it? That's a tax difference. Retirement accounts for high net worth individuals where you take money in a high tax bracket, you put it away in the retirement account, and it doesn't pay taxes that year. It grows tax deferred. When you take it out, it pays. For an incredibly high net worth individual, they're in the highest tax bracket here, highest there. The math, other than the fact they're building an account, really doesn't change what the end result. But if they were in a high tax bracket here and their retirement years, they were in a lower tax bracket, that delta made sense because it's going to grow tax deferred and they're going to pay it at a lower rate.
Mhm.
It made even more sense that if we both died, that money could stretch into my children's lives and they could take it over their lifespan. So my 15-year-old daughter would have somewhere of 80 years to have to take it. 180th the first year, 179th the next year, 178th. She could take it early, but it could spread over her lifetime. And because it's dribbling out of that, and she's probably in a lower tax bracket than me, God, what a win. Asset protected, spread over her lifetime, lower tax rate out, and I got to build a big number. That all made sense. But then, Elizabeth, you were pointing out the Secure Act. We said, we don't like all that. As a federal government, we'd like the money sooner, please. So unfortunately, most young beneficiaries, given the option, just take it and pay the tax to spend. So we used to put trusts around them. But Elizabeth, how long now can they spread it over my child's lifetime?
Well, now it's a lot shorter than it was before.
So now they've got this shorter amount of time that they can take it. And because it's shorter, they have to take a larger amount. So they're going to pay in a higher tax bracket. So that's kind of icky. So what are the other things we can do? Well, if we had a charitable cause, gosh, what a great place to take it from. Pre-tax money to pay for my charitable thing. So if I'm used to contributing, like in my case, to Sharp Hospital, Children's Hospital, the universities or high school my daughter goes to, my church, wouldn't it be great? I can take money out of my retirement account to pay for that. So I take that pre-tax dollar set and I contribute it. Just like in the old days, we used to say, if you're going to give them $100 in cash or $100 in a highly appreciated security, give them the security because it has more buying power. Because if I took that security, paid the tax, I had less to give them the security. The same thing with the retirement account that we can do each year. And maybe when I die, if I'm going to give it to charity, the best place to give it to them because the charity gets the full amount and the tax hit doesn't come. So my family ends up with more of the other assets.
And you and I talked about this too, because we were trying to figure out how do we do charitable giving and then possibly get some benefits so that we don't totally disinherit our children. And so there might be some strategies along in that, that form as well, because I want to kind of, trail back a little bit because you were mentioning something and I think it's really important, and that's family financial literacy. And talking and educating to our younger group, which is our kids. Most kids, they don't even know that they would take something called a stretch IRA before. They just say, give it to me now. And they might still think the same way now, but maybe that's not what mom and dad would have suggested or what they would have wanted. So I think that financial education or family knowledge or family meetings, those are things that should be talked about now so that children know how this works. Because with the Secure Act now, a beneficiary, if it's not a spouse, can take it, lump sum like they did before. The government wants their tax dollars, or they can take out 10% per year for 10 years, or they can wait 10 years to take it all out at one time at that point. So the taxes are not necessarily one thing or another. It's going to happen. The government's going to get their money, but we now can no longer stretch to our children beneficiaries for their lifetime. So that's kind of the icky part, right? So what are some of the pieces that we can do? Joe and I were talking about this, and maybe there's a few different things here that this audience will actually appreciate because everyone's starting to think about this, but it's been on the back burner because we've been in a pandemic. So no one's really been talking about it. And we're in an election year. We don't know if things are going to change again. So how do we really kind of conform into this role? A big part of the conversation that Joe and I talked about was, do we start converting some of that IRA into a Roth IRA and start paying the taxes now? Because does it really make a difference for the value of the money by the time we pass? But then if we pass down a Roth, it's, our next generation, they don't have to take distributions and the distributions will be tax-free. So what are your thoughts on that, Joe?
Elizabeth, one of the joys of that conversation is that one of the great things was stretching over my children's lifetime. So it allowed that tax deferred. And in this case, we'll talk about a tax-free growth. What most people don't realize, and Elizabeth and Katie were talking to me about, is that out of my, let's say, $500,000 retirement account, those $500,000 aren't really mine.
Mm.
Whatever balance it is today, half of that money belongs to the state and the federal government, and the other half, roughly, belongs to me. I'm just merely holding it for them. And as Elizabeth, if you manage that money, you make it grow. Thank you, the Governor Newsom and the President of the United States can write you a thank you note and say thank you very much. The Treasury is going to say thank you very much, Elizabeth, for growing our money.
Isn't it?
Probably not, right?
That's so true. It's so true.
But so if I picture it like that and I realize it's really not my money, if I decide to leave it there as it grows, roughly half is theirs, roughly half is mine, even as it grows to $1 million. But if I decided to bite the bullet,
Mm-hmm.
I could take it out, pay the tax on it, only have my half, and where I put it, it plus all of its future growth is all mine and all my kids. So I'd have to give up already what they had, but what they were going to get out of my money from the growth and what they're going to get out of money from their growth goes away. They don't get it. My family does. So it's hard to bite that bullet. Once you realize that's not really all your money,
Mm-hmm.
then converting to a Roth IRA makes sense. Number two, it allows my kids to take it over a long period of time in a place that I could make creditor protected, that could stay their separate property. And if they ever had a future departing spouse, think about that for a minute, a future departing spouse, they get to keep that.
Wow.
Now, the other thing that we could do, if we wanted to, we could still wrap that by a trust by having an IRA beneficiary designation trust. So as you were talking earlier that the kid could do this, the kid could do that, the kid could do the other. So they could take it all at once, take it 1/10 every 10 years, take it at 10 years, or after this conversion, take it over their lifetime. Many of your clients would say, well, but I want to decide how they take it. And then you say, well, it's their decision. They say, well, not really. I'm their parent. It was my money. It's got to be a way to make my decision. You can. With an IRA beneficiary designation trust, you can tell the trustee how to, and you can even give them rules and say, but if they're in real trouble, give them early. So the idea of converting it to a Roth IRA makes a ton of sense. Within our higher net worth clients, often it makes sense to do that same possibility of a conversion to a Roth IRA. Or if they were in a taxable estate, I might want to convert it by paying the tax and dropping the net proceeds into a large life insurance policy. If somebody died early, there's a big death benefit.
Mm-hmm.
The proceeds from it are not in their estate for estate tax purposes. So I get a 40% reduction on the tax that would otherwise be paid. Or the tax of 40% would not have to be paid, say another way. So those are two different things, either through a Roth conversion or the dropout pay tax, drop through an insurance policy, where my family's going to get more. My family's going to get more. If I need it myself, I do the first one. If I'm merely stewarding for my kids, I do the second. And if I was stewarding for my kids and I had taxable estate, I definitely do the second. But just like financial planning,
Would you ever do a combination, like half and half?
I love combinations because
Mhm.
what it says is estate planning is first and foremost a subset of financial planning. Estate planning is a subset of financial planning, just like investments, just like taxes, just like insurance. Estate planning is a subset. And when you realize estate planning should be looked at like financial planning, that's why financial planners are usually the ones driving the bus on that. There are options you have, and it's a matter of which combination of options. So an off-the-shelf trust is like an off-the-shelf financial plan. Go online, buy a mutual fund, and hope for the best.
Right.
As opposed to setting it, monitoring it, saying it changes for my lifetime.
These are powerful concepts because I think people need to know the average consumer, they don't even know that this tax law took effect a couple years ago. You know, all these different things are all changing. I mean, even the fact that you can have an IRA designation trust, that is something where I think everyone on the planet should have, because the beneficiaries don't know what to necessarily do. And sometimes there's a stronger spouse and a spouse that's just depending on what the stronger spouse is doing, and they don't necessarily know what the next court of, of attention or action is going to be. So That is powerful. I think that's a powerful piece. And I know we didn't talk about this the other day, Joe, but I'm going to kind of go into this too, because are you creating things like this now for estates that as the couple is getting older, maybe a health event actually occurs, are you doing anything for the direction of how someone is cared for with long-term care, or how to protect the estate there? And I know that this is kind of a curveball, but I think it kind of plays in this because it's really telling the story. Most wills, trusts that we read, Katie and I both read, not that we're attorneys, we are not legal professionals, but what we see is this kind of boilerplate method where it's not really designed for the intricacies of what someone should be thinking about. And this is all about details. Everything is about details. We work our entire lives to earn everything we have. We want to protect it, and we think we might be protected, but it's not really protected. So is there something that you're taking the next level with when it comes to long-term care, health events, homesteading, protecting the assets to go to the next generation so that?
So let's take a few stabs at this. First off, let's talk about that division of labor that you had earlier. In many of our clients that are over 50 years old, one of the spouses decided to take charge of the financial direction. They ran the checkbook, they watched the investments, etc. It's a simple division of labor.
Right.
Whether that one was had a more intense job, the other one said, "I'll watch your finances." Whether one was taking care of a family or kids, and the other one was doing finances the other. Whether it was an aptitude, whether the person who used to run the finances didn't do a great job, and they woke up one day and said, "Oops," and the other one said, "I'm stepping up." Very seldom do I see that they do it together. There's usually a lead role, right?
Yes.
And then there's somebody who's not in that lead role. The first and foremost thing is, as we're aging, we really should bring the non-lead role person into the mix. So the first and most powerful thing is saying, you're coming to the financial planner office the once a quarter, twice a year, whatever that number is, to look at this. We're going to look at our plan. Well, no, you just invested, that's what happens. No, actually, we make a bunch of choices all the time. We get educated. We have our goal. We see how we did over the last 6 months to a year to that goal, and we adjust the plan based on taxes, based on investment choices, based on how we're burning the money, etc. So first off, I think it's incredibly important to bring the non-participating spouse, the one that doesn't interact with the money or the advisors much, and drag them along to the accountant, to the attorney, to the financial advisor, and say, we need to do this together. My dad, when he did it with my mom, said, "Sweetheart, I thought it was my job to protect you, and I've hurt you. I want to make sure that you have the power of the pen, because if you continue this way, I'm going to have somebody else in charge, and you should always be in charge. You should be in charge. But to be in charge, you have to come get educated." And she said, "I don't want to. You'll live forever." And he says, "Statistics show that I won't live forever."
Maybe not, yeah.
So after his third heart attack, she said, "Okay, I'll go to the financial advisor with you."
She wanted the power of the pen.
The power of the pen, because she heard this idea that there was going to be a trustee over her stuff, and that wasn't good.
Nope.
So, or my son's going to be in charge of my money? I'm sorry, we're going right now. So the first one is the respect of taking the one that didn't take on the burden of watching that to become part of it and learn. So that's number one. Number two, for those families who have assets, that if one spouse got sick, because remember, when we're 50 years old, we have a 1 in 3 chance of having a major healthcare event that will last for more than 2 years, that will cost more than $250,000.
Wow.
And if it's serious, $500,000. Not that insurance will pay. Long-term care, health insurance pays for a while, you level out, it stops, you have to pay. So we can buy long-term care insurance to insure against it. When I turn 60 years old, it's 1 out of 2 for the rest of my life. So in 3 years, I have a 1 in 2 chance of having to burn $250,000. And if that doesn't matter to my estate, God bless us.
Yeah.
When I turn 65, it's a 2 out of 3 shot. So with that, I can self-insure. If my bucket's big enough that at $250,000 a year or whatever the number is, we can afford it. If it ran for 5 or 10 years at $250,000 a year, we can afford it. Or if it would leave my wife destitute or possibly not having a quality life, I can buy long-term care insurance at a time. Most people say long-term care insurance is too expensive. It's too expensive unless you understand the risk and the cost. And as Katie would tell us, and you would, Elizabeth, long-term care insurance has changed over time. Now there's a return of principal up to 85 or 90% if you need it. If you don't use it, there can be a life insurance benefit. It's changed. Its financial planning tool abilities in the last 5 years have mushroomed into a very different way to look at it. But as a backstop past that, we could always put language in our joint trust. Annie and I can put language in our trust that says, if one of us is disabled, we have I give the spouse who's well the ability to transfer assets to just her to qualify me for public benefits. Many of my clients would say, that sounds good, but Joe, I've seen what public benefits buy.
Not necessarily what people want.
Not as high as I want, and mostly not at home, and I want to stay at home. Then I would say, self-insure, big buckets, plan on selling the properties, whatever. Or we're back to that more expensive thing of being long-term care insurance. But if you haven't looked at it in 5 years, you don't know what it really is. They've changed as a product. And in fact, I can drop $100,000 into a long-term care policy, immediately get $300,000 worth of benefits. If 3 years from now I needed the money, I can pull the 85 out of it. And if I don't use it before I die, it'll have a $500,000 death benefit. From a financially planning perspective, why would I not buy that?
Right. It's a lot cheaper than what you're going to deplete your estate by.
Even if I could afford it, let's say I had $10 million in my retirement account, I had a couple of buildings worth $5 or $10 million. From a financial planning point, I'd look over and say, it's stupid not to hedge my bet.
Right.
But my friends would say, I looked at long-term care a long time ago, Joe, and it just didn't pencil. And my answer back is, yes, but you haven't talked to your financial advisor lately.
Right. And that's what's so important too, Joe, is having the language of how someone wants to insure for that health event, because it's going to happen. There's a 70% chance that once we're past age 65, there's a 70% chance that one or both of us is going to need some kind of a skilled nursing, home care, assisted living, or being in a long-term care facility. If we don't have the bucket of money to be able to pay for that, and we didn't really want to, and we didn't have to, when we could do it, what we wanted to. So I'm just glad we kind of touched upon that subject, because I think it's important not only to talk about, gosh, here's a living trust, here's the pathway for beneficiaries, here's all these different pieces. It's, if we built it, we've been blessed to have it. Don't we want to be able to say that we can give it where we want to give it and have people use it the way it was, destined to become? And then I think a long-term healthcare event or skilled nursing or some type of, any of those, ramifications of a health event could occur, which they more than likely will. Do we want to have our entire estate depleted? No. That's why I'm so glad to hear that you actually put something in place that protects that, not just the product, but also protects the language of how those assets would be protected so that you don't devastate a surviving spouse.
Well, most people think that this is a healthcare discussion. This is a financial planning discussion. This is sitting down and saying, sweetheart, unfortunately, statistics show, like my dad said, I'm going to die.
Yeah.
But more importantly, statistics these days show that we have the kind of assets, and we've worked so hard. We have great health care. The likelihood is we're going to live for a longer time. And the question is what that quality of life is.
Exactly.
And because of the health care we have, we're probably going to live in disability for a period of time too. Do I want to devastate my wife or my children's ability because they have to make the choice of the level of care for me versus their financial security? So you say that you're glad that I did it. I'm not too sure that I had a choice once my advisor sat me down and said, here's the math.
Good. I'm glad that your financial advisor told you. It's so important, Joe. It's so important. I want to kind of dovetail into another subject that we talked about a couple days ago too, and it's more about special needs and special needs type planning, because more and more we have clients that have even adult children that they're still caring for, as well as younger children too. And this is something where not only are there great organizations that can help, but there's certain pieces that can be designed when it comes to a special needs trust that's, I think, somewhat forgotten, because sometimes you might even have a child or a grandchild that you want to plan that estate plan around, but yet you don't know, one day there could be a, you know, a special needs situation that does occur. Is it smarter to put the language in the trust now, or how do you navigate through this in the most delicate way so it benefits everyone?
Sure. So I'll pick on my situation for a moment. My sister married an engineer, and they had two beautiful children, but unfortunately both are autistic. The older one is now a busboy, and that's about as good as it's going to get. He's in his younger 20s. The younger one is in his upper teens, and he has no language and never will. They will always need some sort of support. And though my sister and her husband have done well, unfortunately, this situation drove a divorce too. Now that my sister was through a divorce and now remarried, one of the biggest financial challenges is taking care of those kids now, but also what does it look like in the future? She hasn't really developed an asset set that would support it. So my mom and I have supported that. She was concerned, so she bought a life insurance policy that if I die, here's a bucket that would help. But in doing so, whether I have our part of my estate go to them, or my mom does, or my sister's life insurance, the trouble is that when that money hits them, it would disqualify them for benefits. And there are a lot of benefits you can't buy privately. For instance, their health care, pardoning what our Healthcare Act may or may not be one day, and also services. So how can I write something that augments their life, but still make sure that they qualify for benefits, like maybe a place to live and or healthcare? Because a 18-year-old or a 22-year-old will have a very long lifespan of not making money. So how do we do that? Well, whether it's from our estate, or whether it's from my mom's, or whether it's a life insurance policy that my sister bought. In my case, at one point, my wife said, I know we support them now, but if you were to die, Joe, if you gave a big chunk of ours to take care of those kids, it wouldn't be there to take care of our kids. That's hard on me. So I said, well, for me, why don't I find a life insurance policy that if I died, it would go to them. So now I'm taking care of them. If I stopped, so would it be. But I need to make sure a special needs trust is wrapped in there, whether they inherit or get it through an insurance, because that way, A, somebody's in charge of it to say what to do with it, an irrevocable trust for their benefit, either jointly or separately. And B, augment their life in such a way that they don't disqualify for benefits. And if there was a magic pill where it was all over with and they could make money, give it to them a different way. And afterwards, if they, God forbid, one day pass away, should it benefit the other autistic child, or should that money go to my kids? So I'm able with the special needs trust to do a variety of things. They're irrevocable in nature. There's a separate trustee. It can be their parents, and maybe my sister wouldn't be qualified. Or maybe because my brother-in-law, the man who was married to my sister, I really still love and care for, and I think he'd be great. Or maybe because they were divorced, he was dead to me, as the old-fashioned Italian would say.
Yes, I understand.
Whichever that was, I could choose them, or I could choose a company that does it, that's used to dealing with special needs issues. And I'd want to deal with a financial advisor who could still be at the helm of the ship, because you've heard me a lot tonight talk about estate planning, tax planning is all financial planning. I'd want a financial advisor who's working with a trustee to determine how to invest and how to take, because there are income tax breaks for how we take care of that person, and you have to blend how you do the financial planning with that. So a special needs trust can do great work. There are some pool trusts that are out there where there are some charitable institutions that run them, kind of like a pooled income fund, but a pool trust where I can drop it in and not ask for a separate trustee, etc. Or during my life, I could find my financial advisor who understands and test drive them with a trustee and say, here's some money, you guys go manage to it. Let me watch what you do so I know you'll take care of my kids, or in my case, my nephews after I'm gone. Now, I'm a control freak. So the great likelihood that I'm going to choose a stranger to do it, not much. So I'm probably funding into a trust now that has an insurance benefit and cash. And the money that I used to give to my sister and to the kids, I fund to it and I watch it go to the kids. And I've got a CPA and a trustee that works with my financial advisor that are doing this. And I ask to take a peek a couple times a year.
Mm-hmm.
And that way, just like I would with my children growing up, I'm watching how this works to know that I can trust them afterwards. Now, I'll also tell you, it warms my heart that that financial advisor is taking care of my nephews,
Mm-hmm.
who are the most tender souls of our whole family.
Mm. I mean, that's just such a bright light and something that could be really sad, but now it's such a bright light that there's a future there. And, you know, mom, your sister doesn't have to worry as much because she knows she has you in her life. She's got this, you know, contract that'll protect her, you know, her children, and it'll be something that will go on and into basically into perpetuity. And when the boys are no longer there, then possibly go to even your children. But this is all about design. Everything is a careful design. When it comes to estate planning, it's not that you have to be extremely wealthy to do an estate plan. It's basically you've worked hard for it, you've built it, you want to have control of what you want to go to it. If you just kind of say, well, whatever happens, happens, where's the respect for the money that you actually earn, the wealth that you built, and everything else that you've been blessed for? So I think that these are conversations that Joe and I know the other day we talked for a while, and I know today we could probably even talk longer, but we promised that this fireside chat would be just about an hour. And I know Katie has some questions from the audience, so I want her to be able to answer, you know, ask those questions so Joe can answer them. But again, you know, put it in the comments. What questions do you have? And what we'd like to do too is, even if you want to have a consultation, whether it's with me or with Joe or with Katie or all three of us combined with you, we want to be able to just talk about what is on your mind, because it's thinking about the things that are not necessarily in your, you know, front vision. It might be something in your rear view vision that you just didn't even consider. So now's the time to kind of take action when it comes to doing your estate plan. It's not one of those things to put off. And believe me, I know that there's quite a few of you out there that have been putting it off for a long time, trying to figure out, why do I need to do this? So Katie, do you have some questions that you want to ask from the group?
Yeah, actually, I have a couple questions. I know this question has kind of come up in some of our conversations when it comes to special needs trusts. And I know you talk about your nephew who has, or both nephews who have diagnosis, is correct. But is there a situation where, I guess the question is, can you create a special needs trust for anybody? Do they have to have a certain level of ability? What do you need to know about the person you're creating it for in order to know that that's the right decision?
Sure. So the nice thing is, most people don't want to go over to their sister and say, so give me his diagnosis and does he qualify for a special needs trust? Of course I'd go over, but I could, if I sat down with Elisabeth and I said, you know, kind of coach me what it is. Next time I'm over, I'll ask loving questions and I'll probably get the right data. Elisabeth, just give me enough so I don't feel like an interrogator. Or I've looked on the internet, I've got my top 5 questions. So first and foremost, you can write these things up that says, if they qualify for public benefits, do this. If they don't qualify for public benefits, then put these guardrails on them. So you can still build in, so it will adjust in the future in case there's a magic pill that's solved for it, or in case it's worse than you think.
Mm-hmm.
You could also build in language that gives a person some authority to modify it through a trust protector. So I could give my sister the ability as a trust protector to talk to the trustee to modify things. So I could build in alternate language. So you don't have to know exactly, but you can draft in, don't disqualify for public benefits, look at this person or these 3 people for any variations on it. But my primary goal is to make sure the bucket's there for that person to take care of them. If they no longer need that, here are some variations. And if at the end they passed away, here's who to send it to. And if during that process, they got to be a great productive member of society, they were able to manage their finances, they passed through these gates I create, you know, they graduated from school, or they were in a profession, or they were able to pass this literacy, whatever it is, then we could decide, like we do our other kids, at certain ages, give them certain amounts. Some of our clients put guardrails around the kids the rest of their lives. I look over and I say, well, how are you now? They say, 40, 56 years old. I said, do you have guide rails around yours? Well, no, I know how to manage it. Do you think your kid will by then? So do you do that? Others, I say, wouldn't it be nice if mom and dad would have put guardrails around yours? Then your then departing spouse wouldn't have got half.
Right.
So how do we give guardrails and let your kid be able to bust what they need to, but keep? So Katie, in answer to your question, you don't have to know because you can build in the variations of the language like any contract. Or if you do know, you can invite them to come with you to an appointment with you and Elizabeth to, let's say my sister would come with me, and we could together discuss our financial plan, which might include a trust. Which, by the way, I think my sister would cry to say thank you if I brought her into you guys and said, I want to make a financial plan. I've got a little bit. Can we talk about how to take care of your kids in a way that you approve of?
I think that's so important to know. I think people get concerned about locking things into something that it's irrevocable trust, but that there's still flexibility involved.
Yes, very much so.
I think that's a misnomer for many people is they think once it's in there, it's locked up and it can't be modified or adjusted. And we have a lady right now that we're working with in Florida. And I think that's her biggest concern is that there's not modification or she thinks it's all locked up. So that's actually very, it widens the perception of what she might be able to do for her daughter.
And then there's another piece. When somebody drafts an irrevocable trust, they believe that it's irrevocable and can never be changed. The reality is, if you get the person that drafted, the grantor, the person that put the money in or set the thing up, along with the beneficiaries together to say that it needs to be changed, you can almost always change it in a state by court order, or you can move that trust to a place like Nevada that has decanting provisions. And decanting is this rule like a fine bottle of wine. It's been laying down for a while. It has really nice wine, but it has like that icky kind of sediment at the bottom. Icky came up again. That sediment at the bottom. Decanting is the art of getting a new vessel, a new container, and gently pouring off all the good stuff into this new nice trust or decanter, leaving the last little bit of wine and that sediment in the old one. So we have the ability to decant out of irrevocable trust to new ones, as long as we're not injuring the beneficiary. And normally we're making it better for them.
I think that's pretty incredible. Katie, do you have any other questions?
I think you have all talked a lot about the questions we had. I guess, just looking through this really quick. I know you talked about how you can avoid probate and a lot of other benefits by creating a trust. But what do you say to somebody who maybe thinks, well, the cost of going through probate and the cost of creating a trust, like what's the difference?
Sure. Well, first off, the cost of going through probate, the person online or that's watching will never pay for it because you're already passed away.
Right.
So you're not paying for it, your heirs are. So it's out of the stuff you have left over. The cost of creating or monitoring a trust comes up front. Trust range. There are some trust mills or online things that you can pick them up for $450. Most revocable living trusts these days for a couple that has a couple of young children or adult children are in the $2,000–3,000 range. I will say 15 years ago, that number would have been $3,000 to $5,000. But because of the advent of technology, the ability to not be in brick and mortar for some people, the market has changed that. Of course, that's probably for somebody with assets of a couple $1 million or less. Once you start to climb up in higher levels of assets, you have more opportunities to make choices, to lessen taxes, etc. So the cost may go up a bit. In addition, you can put those special needs trust language or the IRA beneficiary designation trust language in your revocable living trust, or you can do them as standalones now. In it, they only become effective when you die. Standalone, you can fund them now. So again, back to a financial planning point of view. What are the boxes in your plan if you thought through that, and where are the cash flows going through? Probate tends to be more expensive by a factor of 5 or 10, sometimes more with a much larger estate. But it's paid after you die, so somebody says, well, I don't really write that. That comes out of the residual. But that's kind of hard because that would mean out of my financial planning, I shouldn't try so hard. Because in my life, I have a bucket of assets that I'm going to use while Annie and I are alive. I have a bucket of assets that we probably won't use, but we might need. And I have a bucket of assets that I'm merely stewarding for them, the kids. I work real hard to grow that steward bucket to avoid taxes and to go do it. The idea that somebody's going to take money and send it to a court and send it to government out of all my effort really bothers me. So therefore, I do a lot during my life to save that. And that's probably why you do a trust. The second one is that beyond the difference of when I die or alive, my worry more is while I'm disabled. I'm not going to be able to watch over my stuff. Who's going to watch over my stuff if I'm asleep and going to wake up a year later? Or who's going to watch over my stuff if I'm gone with, remember, I'm a control freak? I want some rules to take care of some of these people. Hopefully my wife has visited our financial advisor and our CPA enough where she has the power of the pen. Because in our division, she looks at me and says, you got that. But hopefully she spent enough time to where I say, here's the power of the pen. Let's decide we both have it for our community and my separate. If not, do I have to have somebody else? But also, am I training my kids now? My kids, as they were growing up until they went to college, every dollar they put in their savings account, I put 2 in.
That's pretty awesome.
I wanted them to grow. And when they went off to college, I walked in their financial advisor office with them and I said, how much in the checking, how much in the savings, how much to investment? And they said, well, I'm going to go to work now. And remember when I was working during the summer and I got $1,600 and you made it that big number? I said, well, no, I don't do that anymore. Now you make money with money. But I'll tell you what, whatever you graduate college with, from whatever you had in that account when you walked in, whatever it grows to, that delta, I'll do 5 times over to help you with your first piece of real property. So go meet with the advisor regularly. Go make it grow. Because everything you can do has a 5 times yield. I'm not doing that because I want to give my kids money. I'm doing it so they can see the power of how money makes money. The power of saving. To tell you a cute story, my son, my 19-year-old, we're going to be gone. We're going for our honeymoon. We're going for our anniversary this weekend. So we're going to go up to Los Olivos because the air quality is better up there. And it's time for us for 4 or 5 days. My son and my daughter are here at home, and very typical of us, they're getting some money to do the stuff they'd like to do. My wife said, well, Sal, you've got all that money in your savings and in your checking. And my son said, but Mom, do you know how long it took me to put that money away this summer I was working? I got to tell you, that comment meant my heart sing.
There you go.
So sorry for answering a different question.
No, and you know, it just kind of takes me to a place, and Katie, can I put you on the spot? Because you have a story a little bit from when you were young, what your family told you to do.
Oh, sure. Yes. When I was growing up and got allowances and gifts from family, yeah, my parents, without question, was always put half of it in savings. Whatever you want to do with the other half, but half goes to savings. And honestly, I didn't know what I was saving for, but that's just what I was told to do.
But didn't you say that, you know, you saved a big chunk of that and that's what helped you go to college?
Yeah, it turns out it was for college, but when I was 6 or 7, I don't think that's what they told me it was for. But
A trip to Disneyland, who knows, right?
And you know, oh, by the way, did you hear that CEO of Disneyland called up the governor of California today and said, it's time to reopen, get back to me tomorrow. Which made my daughter's heart sing.
Yeah.
For this conversation, we talked about it. Usually in families, one person takes on the burden. I mean, and I do mean burden because it's the risk, it's the guess of, am I going to do this or do that? It's a gamble. Should I invest this way or that way? They look back and they say, did I win or lose? And if it didn't do as well, we feel guilty. If it did well, we feel good. We still don't share it because then we'd have to share the loss too. Right. And then it's watching it grow and what's the right move? And do we pay off the mortgage? And do we buy the next thing? Or do we buy rental? Do we pay off rental? Do we invest? What loan do we get? Do we refinance or not? All these things in growing it. What do we do for work? How do we do? Do we take the vacation or do we buy another rental place? What is it going to be? That happens. And the person that takes on that burden sometimes forgets that it's important to get everybody else to understand what the method was to help them save this money, to help them grow that money. Right. I often talk to people, they say, well, Grandpa did it by investing in strip shopping centers, so that's the only thing I'll invest in. And I'll say, well, do you have an older gal that knew grandpa? Well, yeah. I said, can we go to lunch with her? And I asked, is that the only thing he ever did? No, honey, that's what he did at the end of his life. This is how he did it earlier on. Here was his theory. So they watched the market, they watched things, and they paid attention, and they changed over time with great advice. If I love my family the way, as strong as I do, to watch out for this and grow it, shouldn't I love them enough to teach them how?
100%. You said it the best there. Shouldn't we teach them how? I think we'll probably pause on that. We're just about 5 minutes to 7:30, and Joe, I can't thank you enough for being here and
Thank
really
you guys.
chat. Yes, it's just a pleasure. You are a wealth of knowledge, and knowledge is power. It's a powerful thing, and there's so many options that people just don't know to think about. I would have loved to have gotten into the conversation of generational legacy planning as well, because I do know that someone's on this call that I think would really benefit from that too, because they're a new grandparent. But at the same time, I would love to engage with any person that's on this call that wants 15 minutes of our time just to talk about it and see how we can parlay them into having you help them strategically do this, but us to be also that partner in the process too, because estate planning, I mean, I've never even heard an attorney tell me this before, but estate planning is very much financial planning. And we couldn't stress it enough as well, because that's really where our passion lies. That's why people ask us so much about how to do this. And we try to get them organized before they go to see Joe or whomever. And it's a powerful piece. I think what pains me is that sometimes for years after years after years, when I'm seeing clients and we've talked about doing the estate plan and basically, you know, putting it all together, because like you said, everyone's a control freak. I've said this for years. Everyone's a control freak and they want to make their own decisions. Why wouldn't you want to do that with your estate? Why would you want to leave it up to the state of California or any other state to have a plan for you that really wasn't the design you wanted, and for other people to make the decisions about what you've built to go where you want it to go? And the disabled is huge, huge.
I couldn't agree more. It's the ability for us. Most people spend more time when their kids are young writing down babysitting instructions for the babysitter than they do in their estate plan. So they should do that. I realized that a lot of these accounting, legal, financial, tax, technical questions can be frustrating or overwhelming. Attorneys, for the most part, make it to where, let me teach you about something versus let's partner to something. I'd highly recommend for everybody on the call, go seek out Katie or Elisabeth and say, can we talk about it ahead of time? Can we talk about all the things that are needed and narrow it down to kind of prep you for those conversations, whether it's over a big tax issue because you're not too sure if you sell the apartment complex or buy the stock, or you take the pension or take the early distribution, or what do I do with the life insurance? What do I do about my income? Should I move? Should I stay? Are taxes too high in California? Where do I get to live? Retirement, all that stuff. The best place to start is with a quality financial advisor that you look across the table and you intuitively trust. In the back of your head, you know your hair's not standing on end because it's bad. There's a trust, and you say, I'm willing to risk my family with you. Help me understand. And then they're this great quarterback or the great coach, better yet, that helps you understand which parts. And they say, here are the people we know and trust. Try that. So thank you all for letting me be with you tonight.
Pleasure. And I just encourage each person attending right now to set up a 15-minute consultation, so she can coordinate with myself and also with Joe. It's been a pleasure to have you all here tonight, and thank you so much. And Joe, we can't be more thankful to you. I'm so grateful. I know time is very precious. And Katie, thank you so much for coordinating us all.
Of course. And
Thanks,
if you
Katie.
are still on, just hang out for a minute and a survey will pop up. We'd love to see how we can follow up with you and what you might be interested in listening to. So thank you so much for joining us, and have a good night.
Have a great night.
Thank you all.
Yes, take care.
The information provided in this show is for informational and educational purposes only. This show is not investment advice, nor is it intended to address the financial needs of any particular viewer. The opinions expressed on this show are not intended to be an endorsement of any particular investment strategy, or service of any other kind. You must make an independent decision regarding investments or strategies mentioned throughout the show. Before acting on information in this show, you should consider whether it is suitable for your particular situation and strongly consider seeking advice from a financial advisor.